Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our Nebraska Visitors edition of the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today is Huskers radio play-by-play voice Greg Sharpe. Before we hear from him, let's get it rolling with a few audio snippets from Jim's Monday presser. Jim was asked for his thoughts on how his offensive line backups performed on Saturday against Rutgers.
Really good. I mean, especially when Raheem got in there, he played extremely well. So did Andrew Gentry. Andrew was really good on field goal protection as well, but I thought there was some great snaps for them, along with Jeff Percy. Jeff had a really good game, lot to build on, a lot to build from. Gio as well. I mean, he just plays with such passion and energy when he's out there. It's contagious. So I mean, they're definitely coming right along to being really good players.
Jim addressed a question regarding just what adjustments were made at the half.
Yeah, I would. I mean, the numbers are really good, right? Incredible. The thing I would point to more than adjustments or anything is just how hard our guys are playing. It just screams at you on the tape when I watch it, especially on the defense. But the offense too, and the way we play on special teams, it is so noticeable just how hard guys are playing, and and it's 60 minutes of that kind of effort that it's as the game goes on. To your point, I mean, conditioning sure factors in, but it's consistently at a high level. I mean, the hustle is there. It's constant hustle. It's hustle at all times. It's guys playing really hard.
There have also been concerns about Michigan's lack of creativity in the red zone this year. Jim said they are trying a lot of different ways to score.
The previous game we played where we got down there 4 times and we didn't get the ball in the end zone twice. 2 of those were the results of losing yardage. You got the ball on the 6-yard line, and you run a play. Now it was a pass play. It was the first play we called, and creative play, but we ended up losing 3 yards on it. Then we had run an outside zone play, I believe it was, lost another 3 yards. So I really wanted to see more of we got the ball in the 5 or the 6 in this game that we were going straight ahead. 1st and 6 becomes 2nd and 2. 2nd and 2 became 3rd and 1. 3rd and 1 became 4th and 1. 4th and 1, touchdown. I wanted that scenario to play out in this game, and we were fortunate enough to get it in. Now we've done that. All options are open going forward, of course. So we have gotten it in on different ways, fly sweep. We've thrown it in, did it did it in this game. But yeah, all those options are open.
Jim said he was not surprised freshman Will Johnson had a big game in his first start.
Yeah, I talked about it a few weeks or maybe months ago, I think, just how well he was covering guys in practice. Just a real talent to cover in man-to-man situations, to break on the ball in the zone, to see the ball in zone, to have the really good ball skills to really track the ball well. It wasn't a surprise, but really happy for the way he's playing. The physical part of the game has been great. In games, to see some of the tackles, he's had a big tackle. Seems about every game he's been in there. So he's just doing a fabulous job, and keep it going. And he's a great player.
Jim also had high praise for Blake Corum and talked about how much he means to this offense.
I mean, he's definitely having an MVP season for us here at Michigan. It'd be hard to imagine that he wouldn't, the way he's going, win the Heisman Trophy. Leading in touchdowns, leading in points scored, consistently really good every game. There's been quite a few backs who've won the Heisman Trophy, and I would bet my truck that Blake Corum is on pace or ahead of many of those running backs that have won the Heisman Trophy. I know had a great running back at Stanford, Toby Gerhart, who finished second. Blake has meant even more to this 2022 team than Toby did, that season. So I would, and there I go, making a comparison, which I should never do. But that one, two great players. It's like trying to, compare. I always try to stay away from that. But yeah, Blake's he's except for some of the pro backs, definitely. Probably the only exception would be Frank Gore, that I was able to coach. Blake is the best running back I've coached.
My guest today says finding a way to just hang around with Michigan will be the goal this week for Nebraska. It's been a topsy-turvy year for the Huskers, but each week they bring it and make whoever they're playing work hard. With us next is Nebraska radio play-by-play voice Greg Sharpe, so stay with us. Here with us on our visitors edition of the show this week is Nebraska radio play-by-play voice Greg Sharpe. It's great once again to have you back with us, Greg.
Good to be here, and always love talking college football.
Oh, yes, and we have a big one coming up Saturday at Michigan Stadium, and let's talk about this Nebraska team that we're going to see in the Big House. They had a close one against Minnesota in Lincoln on Saturday. They lost 20-13. The Huskers held a 10-0 lead at the half, and at that point, we're really in control of the game, weren't they, Greg?
Yeah, I did some really good things in the first half, but as you know, it's a 60-minute game, not a 30-minute game, and Nebraska's kind of had that issue for the last couple of weeks. They had a lead on Illinois in the first half, and then the starting quarterback Casey Thompson suffered an injury, and that game really flipped 2 weeks ago. And then, with the backup quarterbacks playing last week, they did some really good things on both sides of the ball against the Gophers, but just could not sustain it in the second half and come up short.
Well, I guess that has to be the frustrating thing. You play a really clean first half with your backup quarterback or quarterbacks, and you're ahead. But, as you said, it's a 60-minute game, and in the end, a very close loss, but it's just very frustrating, isn't it?
That's been the story of this program for the last couple of years. You go back to last season, and Nebraska goes 3-9, and every game they lost were by one score, including a tight one to the Wolverines on a Saturday night in early October. And it's just a point where this program has not figured out a way to win those close games, and that's what's really hurt them week to week to week in the last several seasons of this for this program. And until you get over that hump, that's you're going to continue to kind of fall down that rabbit hole, and that's, I think, obviously why Nebraska is in the midst of a coaching search right now.
Well, a positive on Saturday was the running game. The Huskers outgained Minnesota 146 to 125 and led by Anthony Grant's 115 yards. I think he had 21 carries. So for Michigan fans that really haven't seen much of Anthony Grant, he is one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, isn't he?
Really good back. Started his career at Florida State and then had some great issues, ended up going to a junior college, and Nebraska fortunate to pick him up last year in the signed him out of a junior college deal. And he's had 5 100-yard games this year, and that's the first one that he'd had since late September when he had 100 against Indiana. Nebraska had kind of gotten away from running the ball. One of the teams, I think, knew that Anthony was a big part of their offense, sort of keying in on the running game. But he's a really good back, good athlete, very patient runner that waits for the hole to develop, and it was good to see him get going again.
In the passing game, as we mentioned, the backup quarterbacks playing, but produced 121 yards against the Gophers. Chubba Purdy, Logan Smothers combined for 11 of 26 through the air, filling in again for injured starter Casey Thompson. And for the most part, they were pretty efficient, weren't they?
Not really. Honestly, Mike, they weren't. Passing game was really ugly to watch at times on Saturday, and I certainly missing a 4-year starter in Casey Thompson, who started his career at Texas. Not having him available last week was really hurtful, but I think a lot of people would feel it was pretty disappointing from the passing game. Nebraska's got some pretty good wideouts. Trey Palmer's one of the better wideouts in this conference, but when you can't get him the ball he's not going to help you out much if you can't get him the ball. So, we'll see what happens this week and whether Casey can get back. It was a nerve injury to his elbow that he suffered against Illinois 2 weeks ago. Practiced a little bit last week. We'll see what the verdict is for him this week. But if it's going to be Purdy or Smothers, they both have to be more efficient in the passing game than they were this past week.
Well, if Casey Thompson is cleared to play on Saturday, for those of us, for Michigan fans who have not seen much of him other than highlights, Greg, tell us about what he brings to this Huskers offense and how he's performed overall so far this season.
Well, he comes from a great pedigree, and from a family standpoint, his dad Charles Thompson was a terrific quarterback at Oklahoma in the 80s. Ran that wishbone attack for Barry Switzer. And then here Casey doesn't go to Oklahoma out of high school. He goes to their biggest rival in Texas, started it for the Longhorns a year ago, and then Texas decided to kind of go a different direction with their starting quarterback this year. And so Casey entered the portal, and Nebraska was fortunate enough to get him. And he's had some really big games for the Huskers, throwing the ball through the air. And again, as I mentioned, some pretty good wide receivers for him to throw to. So Nebraska's certainly a different team when Thompson can play. And I know the hopes around here is that he can be back on the field on Saturday.
Well, hopefully he's good to go on Saturday, and we've talked about how good of a running back Anthony Grant is for this offense, but who are some of the other key contributors we're going to see in the Big House this Saturday on that offense?
Yeah, Trey Palmer's, again, one of the better wideouts in the conference. Excellent speed. I think he would be projected to be a first or second round pick in the draft next April. Has had some electrifying games, had over 230 yards receiving against Purdue just 3 weeks ago, which was a school record at Nebraska, what he's able to do. Outstanding speed. Marcus Washington came with Casey Thompson from Texas a year ago. Palmer was an LSU transfer portal into Nebraska's program. Marcus Washington's been a good guy. Travis Vokalek is a very solid tight end for Nebraska as well. So there's some weapons there, but you got to have a trigger guy that can get them the ball. And so far, we've only seen that really happen with Casey Thompson's been at quarterback.
Well, over on the other side of the ball, the Nebraska defense was solid on Saturday. They've really been good all year for the most part. They slowed down a great Minnesota rushing attack and really kept the Huskers in the game. So the D is showing consistent improvement, isn't it?
Well, Nebraska made not only a change with the head coach, but also changed defensive coordinators mid-season this year. Bill Bush took over the unit after Game 4. And they've had stretches of pretty good play. They 2 weeks ago against Illinois only allowed 6 points in the second half of the Illini. The first half against Minnesota, the Gophers only managed 31 yards of offense. So they did a really nice job. Now, to the Gophers' credit, they were patient, waited, got Mo Ibrahim going in the second half, and were able to fight their way to a win. But there's been some stretches where the defense has played pretty well. A lot of young guys on that side that are starting to grow up, as you have to do in the Big Ten Conference.
Got to see a little bit of the game on Saturday, and Miles Farmer led Nebraska, I think, with a game and a career-high 14 tackles. Luke Reamer added 9 stops. Caleb Tanner contributed 6 stops. Who else on that defense is contributing, and we're going to see Saturday?
Yeah, those guys are probably your main people. Farmer has been in the program a couple of years, a pretty solid safety, particularly in the run support. I think that's where he's probably better. Reimer is a very fast linebacker, leads Nebraska in tackles this year. And then you've got some edge rushers. Garrett Nelson's a guy that plays with great effort. He's an edge rusher and gets upfield and can put pressure on the quarterback. So those are kind of your main cogs to the defense for the Huskers this year.
It still has to be frustrating overall because the only full game that I've gotten to see this year was the first one against Northwestern, and then bits and pieces on tape. But when you watch this team, it's maybe a little bit different than last year, where you thought, oh, they're so close with those 9 losses by single digits. They still, when I've been able to see them play this year, look so very close to it all clicking, but it just hasn't happened.
Well, Mickey Joseph, the interim coach for Nebraska after the dismissal of Scott Frost, has done a really good job of keeping this team together. They do play really hard week in and week out. They're not going to just come in and lay over and let somebody just kind of mop them up and down the field. And so I credit Coach Joseph for doing that, keeping this team to fight and get after it. But again, it's just kind of missing that winning gene. They just have not been able to figure out how to win close games. And in this league, nobody's going to hand one to you. You got to go earn it. Nebraska just hasn't been able, as I mentioned earlier, put together a 60-minute stretch.
It's really been a tough year with Coach Frost being let go so early in the season. And, you know, some teams go south pretty quickly after coaching changes like that. But as you mentioned, that hasn't happened with this team. So credit to Coach Joseph.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. So many teams, if you make that move, it ends up just kind of really getting off the rails because you have a coaching staff that's probably very distracted with their own future. Where are they going to be? But this, to the credit of the guys that are still running the program and the players in the program, they have fought and played really hard. Got the back-to-back wins over Indiana and Rutgers in late September, early October. Lost a battle at Purdue in the middle of the month, and then have come up short the last 2 weeks with Illinois and Minnesota. But again, credit to Coach Joseph for a lot of fight. He's certainly former Husker himself, former quarterback for Tom Osborne. He's gotten the guys to believe and continue to fight and scratch their way through the season.
Well, Greg, this Saturday is another great opportunity for Nebraska facing number 4 Michigan here in the Big House. And in what areas, both offensively and defensively, do you think Nebraska has the personnel to, attack and have some success against this Michigan team?
Well, it's a real challenge. Michigan's one of the best teams in the country. I think that's played out over the last couple of years. I think you have to try to slow their running game down some and make them go through the air, but they certainly are adept at doing that. And then it's going to be hard, I think, to move the football. Michigan is so stingy on defense, playing so well, great athletes from front to back. So Nebraska is going to have to play the near perfect game, I think, to hang in this one in the Big House. This will be a big-time challenge for the Big Red.
Well, every game is big for interim coach Mickey Joseph. If he finishes strong, do you think he'll have a shot at the job permanently?
Well, Trev Alberts, Nebraska's athletic director, has been really quiet. He's and I think that's a good thing. He's been searching, been looking, been making a lot of phone calls. Has he had interviews? I don't know. He's kept that very quiet. I think he has left the door open for the possibility that Mickey Joseph could end up being the permanent guy moving forward. But he's made no promises, and I think Mickey knows that. I think Mickey knows he's in the middle of a big, long job search or job interview going on, and so what he's putting together each week with the team fighting certainly helps his cause, but whether he can end up being the permanent guy, I just don't know.
Take something like maybe a big win against a team like Michigan and maybe finishing winning all 3 of your final games?
Yeah, I think that would certainly help. I think, a postseason bid would certainly bolster his chances to become the permanent guy. I think anything short of that, I would be surprised if that's the direction Nebraska goes.
Well, what is amazing to me is the Nebraska fan base, Greg. They travel well, great fans to interact with when they're here in Ann Arbor, when I've been able to talk to them. And the support they give the program is just off the charts. Last Saturday was, I think, the 388th consecutive sellout at home. Through thick and thin, that fan base just loves their Huskers, don't they?
Yeah, they sure do, and it's a credit to them to continue to support the program. It's been a long drought here of unsuccessful seasons for Nebraska, and The fans continue to hang in there. You don't want to take that for granted, and I know Trev Alberts and the administration, they don't. They thank the fans at every turn they can, but they're being patient, but it's being tested right now with the lack of successful seasons in several years now consecutively. But yeah, they do. They love coming to Memorial Stadium and cheering on their Cornhuskers, and tip of the cap to them, because there's been a lot of tough Saturdays to walk in and out of that stadium, and they continue to show up and support them.
Yeah, they do. Well, final question before we let you get away, Greg. Nebraska joined the Big Ten in 2012, and that was for a variety of reasons, and really has competed at a very high level in a lot of sports in the conference. But football, it's been tough sledding, as you just mentioned. Do you think it's still possible Nebraska can get back to being, the kind of national powerhouse they were prior to joining the Big Ten?
Oh, I think so. I think you have to have the right formula. You have to have the right head of the program. And you look at a lot of programs that have gone through down times, and I know we've gone through a extended period at Alabama where they've been so good. But I'm old enough to remember when they went through coaches like Doug DeBose, Mike Price for about a half a second as their head coach, and Mike Shula was their head. I mean, people are like, who are these names? Well, yeah, that Bama went through a rough stretch. Oklahoma's gone through rough stretches. Michigan has gone through some rough patches. It happens. I think one thing you can't go do is replicate tradition, and Nebraska has that. They've got 5 national championship trophies sitting in their football office. They've got 3 Heisman trophies inside their trophy case. Those things you just can't replicate. And as long as you have that, and as you mentioned earlier, the passionate fan base, it makes it attractive. Now, you got to make the right hire. You got to do the right things. But I think Nebraska can get themselves back into the upper echelons of this sport again at some point in time.
Another big opportunity this Saturday when the Huskers visit the Big House to take on Michigan, 3:30 kickoff. With us today has been Nebraska radio play-by-play voice Greg Sharpe. Greg, we thank you for being generous with your time. Always love having you on the show, and we look forward to the next visit.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
On Quick Hits today, no injury updates from the Monday presser. Thanks again to Huskers radio play-by-play voice Greg Sharpe for being our guest. On Thursday's Michigan Game Day show, we'll be joined by beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. So make sure you tell your friends and family about the show and join us on Thursday. That will do it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. Until we meet again, take care. And as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!